Morning, brother. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. And yourself?
I'm not bad at all, thank you. How's your morning going?
It is, you know what? It's going pretty well. It's going pretty well. Just got done with the coaching call. So that went that went well. And yeah, it's been pretty good. How about you? How's your morning?
Pretty chill. Did a little bit of an exercise, a little workout, little bike, and then a little
Nice.
bit of physio stuff for my shoulder, and then yeah, I did a bit of reading, showered up. Here I am. That's it. Ready to
That
rock
sounds
and
like a
roll.
wonderful morning.
Yeah, happy Saturday.
Yeah,
Beautiful, man. How
absolutely.
how was the coaching call? How do those normally go? If you don't mind me asking. Sorry, without getting like too like in deep and
Yeah.
personal.
So, um, with the election happening Tuesday, there's a lot of emotions. And it was definitely working through what those emotions and um how to best to utilize them. But like in general, the coaching calls really are centered, like the way that I coach, it's centered around, okay, how is all of this stuff impacting me? How do I want to show up in the world? And then how can I take steps to show up that way and continue to show up that way? And so it's being honest about how I'm showing up right now versus how I want to show up and what are the steps I can take to get there rather than just feeling like you have to do all of that right now. And sometimes that's revolving around alcohol, people's relationship to alcohol. Sometimes it's their relationship with anger. Other times, it's food and just work, relationships. It applies all across people's lives. But then when they start to develop a better understanding of their emotions and how their emotions are impacting their world, like that's when things can really start to open up and changes can really be made. So yeah, that's this morning kind of pretty much went that way too. So
Yeah. That's awesome, man. Yeah, I 100% agree with that. I do a lot of well, out of necessity, I have to do a lot of reflection, man, a lot of journaling, and that's always what it is. Like I do have kind of the same impulsive like behavioral things you were talking about, like with anger, with emotional eating. Sometimes I deal with that. It's like, well, and it's shifted throughout my life. I stopped drinking, I stopped partying, so it's crept into other avenues. Like so,
yeah,
so it's yeah, it is interesting sometimes when I'm sitting down and thinking about like, when I got this mad today, what was going on, and like how can I take accountability for that? Like what am I going to be able to change here? Because like
yes,
there's it's not always something that you can like alter with other people or with other, and it's just it's interesting when you start to look at it, because like I've said it so many times where it's like you see the same pattern over and over again. You're like, man, why do I have to keep dealing with this? And you're like, oh, maybe I'm part of the problem.
oh, and you can see that with relationships. Like, I went through a divorce. Uh, it's been kind of going on for the past 4 years or so, and like it finalized last a year and a half ago. Um, and I had to look at, okay, why do all of my relationships end up here? Because they have. Well, I'm the common thread. Okay, what about me is is it the people that I'm choosing? What am I choosing them for? Why am I choosing those people? Like, is it, how I'm showing up with those people? And the answer is it's all of the above. But okay, what can I take and how can I use this rather than feeling like this is what I'm stuck with and this is all that I have to work with, because that's not true no matter how old somebody is, no matter how many times things have shown up in different ways. You can always choose to show up differently. It's just how can I choose to show up differently, and opening your mind to, I don't know what it's necessarily going to look like. I just know it's going to be a little bit different the next time. And we'll see what happens then.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I know for myself, like that's one of the things that I do, because definitely there's uh you know I guess the best way to say it is like people frustrate me a lot more than things do. I
Mm,
take it a lot more personal when it's a person. I guess that makes sense, but like
yes.
yeah, I consistently kind of in my journal, that's what I write down is like, why did I react this way? And what can I make different next time? And I try and think about like what were they doing? That like what was it something they said? Was it something physically that they did? Was it something like was I sad? Was I threatened? Was I just hungry? Like what's going
Mm,
on? You know, like for me, it's like always
yes.
I have to kind of look at that and and just kind of think about like what was going on there. And then I what kind of touching on what you said is like I try and think about, you know, a tactic of like, okay, when I start to think of like this, like for me, I boiled it down to a cue. I could feel it like a physical cue of like, okay, I'm
Yes.
about to lose it. Like my fists start to clench. I get warm and like kind of sweaty. And I'm like, I can kind of start to feel it cueing in my body. And I'm like, all right, now this time I'm going to try this. This time I'm going to try that, you know, and just kind of like figuring out. And the weird thing is too, is what I've found is like, you know, all these different solutions. It's like, okay, this is how I'm going to try this reaction with my mother this time. Or with my girlfriend this time, or with my buddy this time, and it's like, well, this solution worked with this person, but over here it caused more problems. Like it's kind of it almost feels like it's like an uphill battle all the time.
Oh, and then yeah, it's sorting through, okay, was it me like in how I showed up that caused things to escalate because it worked over here? Or is that part of what they should be working on? And it actually has nothing to do with me. So
Right.
that tactic might work actually more often than not. But okay, with my parents, I'm just like I'm still going to use it. And maybe after 5 or 6 times, it doesn't cause an escalation, just kind of works a little bit. They're just not used to the different way that you're showing up. Um, but yeah, like you said, finding those cues. What was the feeling that I had when this started to build up? Because maybe that is the cue, is this feeling that, I felt a little bit disrespected and it just flipped right as soon as I felt that disrespect. Um, or sometimes, it's being minimized. And okay, now I can feel that. And then something that I've noticed in myself is if my brain starts thinking really fast, like if I start getting into like really hyperactivity in my brain, my breath is following suit. So my breath is short and quick, and like I'm getting ready to fight, I'm getting ready to run, I'm getting ready to do something, like have a reaction. Okay, if I can change my breath, okay, if I can slow that down, take a deeper one here, just one deeper. Can I take a second one deeper? And then my brain starts to slow down, and I am not reacting to the emotion that's happening, but I'm responding how I want to.
Yeah. It's interesting you say that you get short, shallow breaths. I notice when I'm in those kind of situations, I stop breathing. I just hold my breath.
Mm,
And
yeah.
I noticed it actually at work at first. I'm a carpenter. I do home renovations
Okay.
and
I'm an
like,
electrician.
oh, okay, sweet. Yeah, that's wicked, man. I but anytime I'm like super like pissed off at work, I'm like, wait a second, I forgot I didn't breathe for like 57 seconds there. Like
That's
it's I don't know if that
oh,
happens to you ever. I don't know.
yeah. I've noticed like when I'm stopping breathing, like that's to stop myself from blowing up.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Right. So like I'm at the edge. So can I catch it before I stop breathing? But like even if you catch it as you're stopping, why am I stopping breathing right now? What's going on? Like, oh, and so I have 2 kids, they're 5 and 6. And one place that I notice this, if I'm irritated with them, I have to check in. What am I irritated about right now? Right? Is it them and what they're doing? Or, and sometimes I'm just irritated at how they're playing. Like,
Right.
okay, am I really irritated at them for how they're playing right now? Or is there something underneath it, right? Something that could be, well, they're making a big mess. Okay, we can clean that up. Keyword being we. Doesn't mean that I have to clean it up. They're old
Mhm.
enough. They know they can clean it up themselves afterwards, or we can clean it up together. Another thing is, okay, what happened at work or the drive? Or, is there something that I'm irritated about there? And then oftentimes what it is, the most often it is an interaction with their mom, my ex-wife. It's like, That is more what I'm irritated about. And then I'm just transferring it to the people nearest to me, I'm just going to be irritated with. And it
Mhm.
happens to be them. And when I notice that, it's like, okay, I can pull back. I'm not actually irritated with them. I'm not actually mad at them. I can show up differently and apologize for the irritation, like for the, coming out maybe with a little bit of a yell, a little bit of a, um, uh, just, I don't know, maybe some words or something like that. And just realize that I'm safe. Like she's not here, the traffic isn't here. I can leave that. And of course, I'm irritated about it, but I don't have to allow it to control how I'm showing up with my kids.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's been useful.
Yeah. It kind of for me it reminds me of kind of the way I think about it too is I always think about like how do I want them to remember me? And it kind of
Mm,
sounds like almost like fueling your own ego, and it probably kind of is. But it also, if it can help course correct behavior, then why not try it out? Like,
yes.
so that's the kind of way I look at it is like I started writing down in my journal, like, how do I want my dad to remember to think of me? Like if I go before him, how do I want him to remember me? Like, and then I think about that with my friends. Like, what would they say to me if they were describing me? And like, probably not what I would want. So I should probably start to change that because I like it's funny. I had a boss a long time ago when I worked in like the fitness industry in the gym, and I looked up to this guy so much just purely based off of how he handled like stressful situations. He was just like always so stoic and calm and like, oh, what's going on? Like I'd come to him, I'd be like, dude, like I have this issue, and he's like, yeah, what's going on? Let's sit down. Let's have a chat about it. And literally just by like telling him the problem, he'd be like, what do you think we should do? I'm like, how did I just solve my own problem and you just chilled? Like it was like so cool and calm, and like I was like, man, I want to be like that guy. Like that's how I want to be like that. And I'm not even like close to it, but like it's and there's almost something as well where it's kind of like you have to understand like okay, but I'm not wired that way, and I can't just beat the hell out of myself. Like I kind of have to fall in love with who I am, but also adapt to having
Yes.
some of those qualities as well. Like if I could
Ooh.
maybe take a tenth of that and just add it into my collection.
Yeah. Yes. There's so much, there's so much there in everything that you just said. And, taking what you like from other people, recognizing that it's not going to fit one for one because I'm a completely different person. And because I'm unique, I can do something similar, but it's going to be in my own unique way. And so, how can I move towards being the person that when there's a shit ton of chaos, I'm calm? I'm showing up logically. I'm not ruled by my emotions. How can I get to that place? Well, there's a lot of different ways. How's it going to show up for you? And I think a lot of that is lost with social media, right? Because social media, you feel like, oh, I need to be able to use this one for one. This worked for this person. It needs to work for me. And it's like, but it's not going to. It's going to look different for you. You can try and put somebody else's mask on, right? And show up in the world in that way, but it's not going to feel how it should feel. You're going to feel empty. You're going to feel like something's missing, something isn't right. And maybe that'll happen a month from now. Maybe it'll happen 10 years from now. But eventually you're going to recognize that you're not showing up how you want to show up. You're not being you.
Yeah,
You're being somebody else. And
yeah,
that is a really difficult place to be.
yeah. I think as well, like I think that stems for me, like when you say that, it really kind of makes me think about like as I've kind of like just shifted from like friend group to friend group or job to job or per like kind of relationship to relationship and just like who I am. And it is kind of weird how, especially like if you have like that little bit of like people pleaser in you, how much we like you keep saying like how we show up. I just kind of like think about even sometimes it's just like who I feel like.
Yeah.
Like I kind of just feel like a different person sometimes. I don't know if that like if I think back to like my 18-year-old self versus my 29-year-old self, I'm like, that's a different person. like
Mm-hmm.
completely different person. And it's so, I don't know. For me, I just it's weird to think back on that.
And having the recognition that it's okay to try these things on to see if they fit for you, right? Because that's really what you're doing. Let me try this on and see if it fits. I've, I used to call myself like I was the chameleon or like the sponge. Like I would take what I felt like people wanted to see in me, and that's how I would show up. And that, that led me to not really knowing who I was, not knowing how I wanted to show up, not just feeling like, that emptiness that I was talking about. Um, and I had to sort through all of that. Okay, which one of these actually fits me? And which one of them do I feel like I should be because somebody may have told me I should do this? Or
Mm.
I feel like this is what my coworkers wanted to see from me. Or, and a lot of it looked like wanting to fit in rather than allowing myself to be accepted, wanting to be that chameleon and blend in and fit in and find find community, find the people that I could actually be myself with. And some of that too was exploring to figure out what I liked and who I wanted to be and how I wanted to show up. And a lot of times you don't know till you try. And it's like, no, that didn't work. No, that was how I think they show up best. But for me, that's just not how it doesn't work like that. And that's okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I kind of, like I said, like I kind of went through that because when I first found like Stoic philosophy around the
Mm.
same time as I had this boss. And I was like consistently striving. I had the same misconception that a lot of people have where I like you hear the word stoic and you're like, "Oh, emotionless." Oh, okay.
Yes.
Just no emotion. And I was like, "How do I get there?" And then every day there would be like I'd yell at the garbage can for not having enough space or something like that. Like it would just be like something like so and you're like, oh, I thought I was closer, but I feel like I'm further. And you kind of just like looking, and I was like, how do I get to be like a statue? Like, how do I become that? And then I'm like, kind of realizing, it's I am an animated person, like this is I just kind of have that you'll know what emotion I'm feeling. If I'm pissed off, you'll know. If I'm having a good time, you'll know. Like it's just I'm kind of like that. I wear my heart on my sleeve. And so to try and like erase like one of the fundamental parts of my like I've just always been like this, like and it's kind of one of those I hate when people say that. They're like, "Oh, I've always been this way, so like I always will be this way." And you hear people say that with like addictions or you hear people say that with a bunch of other things. But there's like kind of like fundamental parts of like our personalities that are just like and you see it as like a kid's a baby. You're like whether they're like they kind of want to be to themselves and they're like, "Oh, I want to just be like that people person." You're like, "Yeah, but you're not." Like, why are you trying to force your square ass body into a round hole? Like, that's not what you're like. Why are you doing this? Like, why are you
Mm-hmm.
pretending? And I kind of was on the other end of that. It's like I just want to be like stoic. I want to be a statue. I want to be like I want to be at like a baseline all the time. And I was like, I kind of have to appreciate like my the fact that sometimes I'll be a zero, but sometimes I'll be a 10. It's you got to kind of roll with the punches. And for me, like I said, it was kind of adapting that like, okay, like I'm not going to be this like statue emotionless man, but like maybe my goal can just be like maybe I'll catch it 5 seconds faster. Maybe I'll just be able to like not let the emotions control me as much. And like I'm not perfect
Yes.
at it. But like that's just it's just like maybe I'll just try. So that was just a fundamental struggle for me. It was like I wanted to change like who I was. And I was like I said, I felt like I was trying to jam a square into a circle hole, you know?
Yep. I feel such that same thing when, and I got it when, um, you know, that's how I was raised. Like that's how all the people around me were. It seemed, right? And then Star Trek came out, like the new one with Chris Pine and Zachary Quinto, and so Spock. right? What was Spock? Emotionless,
Yeah.
showing up like that. Like that's the superior being, is somebody who can be logical all the time. And that way you can make the right decisions. And I took the wrong lessons from what that was. So then like I went even more into I'm always at that 3, right?
Yeah.
Not going to see me up, not going to see me down. The problem with that is not only am I bringing my emotions that are like at a rut up, so like I'm not making decisions from like depression or things like that. I'm taking my joy, I'm taking my excitement, I'm taking those, if you want to say, positive, but like the pleasant emotions, and I'm also bringing those down. And so now I can't enjoy those things. And I saw a TikTok when I was learning to feel my emotions and get to a point where, okay, they're not going to control my actions, right? Or at least I'm going to limit how much they control my actions. And they said, if you look at a heart monitor, what does a heart monitor have? It has ups and it has downs. What happens when the heart monitor is straight?
That's it. Game over.
Yeah. So why isn't it the same with emotions? You're going to have ups, you're going to have downs. What happens when it's straight and it's flat? It's like you're not really living.
Right.
You're just
Yeah.
kind of floating through life. And that's how I felt when I look back at that time, and how I felt at that time. I know I felt that like I was just floating through life. I wasn't actually, like I was on autopilot. I wasn't actually living how I wanted to live. I wasn't actually doing things that I enjoyed. And yeah, so figuring out how it was going to, like, my emotions were going to work for me and not allow them to control me, but they're still going to have an impact on me and show up. Um, and that's been a hell of a learning experience.
Yeah. What prompted you to even start this journey? Because I feel like even with when I started kind of just looking into these types of things, I had a roommate at the time, and I started making like pretty dramatic changes in my life.
Mm-hmm.
And he was like, hey, like some of your other friends have messaged me asking like to see if you're okay, because I wouldn't hang out with them at certain times. I wouldn't go to certain places anymore. I wouldn't do certain things. I even like when my friends would text me and ask me like, hey, do you want to hang out? I would be like, what do you want to do? Because I had to make sure that there was nothing that was gonna, you know, I wasn't, I was kind of, I felt like I was vulnerable in a
Mm-hmm.
sense that like I was in that like kind of people pleaser mentality, and I felt like I was subject to do anything that was in front of me. so I had to kind of protect myself. But the reason I asked that is like what kind of prompted you to start looking into all this that kind of stuff? Like what prompted you to start to dig into yourself that way?
My wife came to me and asked for a divorce. That's that was when like my life was on the outside as perfect as it could get. And, I had a really great career. I was actually, high voltage line tech, and I was actually a foreman of a crew for high voltage line tech. So um, that was going really, really well. Um, had a house, had second baby born, um, co-owned a business with my wife. Like everything seemed like it was great, but inside I just felt empty. Like, there's got to be more to life than just this. And things were really stressful, between work and home, things like that. And I started I missed a doctor's appointment for my kid, which that never happened because family was more important to me than the job, than anything else. And then I missed another appointment, or I didn't miss them, but I was late. And then I was late to another appointment for my wife, and it was like, okay, something's not right. And so, probably 2 to 3 weeks after that, she asked me for a divorce, and it hit me out of nowhere because I knew things weren't great, but it's like, okay, we have 2 kids under 2. things will get better. It's just a matter of getting through this low point, right? Um, and I just said, okay, give me a year. I'll go to therapy. I'll get diagnosed with ADHD, start medication. I'll try my hardest to create this um, sense of connectedness and figure out what's going on with me. So I did that. And actually, starting my own podcast, that led me even to a better understanding and a want to understand myself even more. More so than therapy did, because I was listening to other people's experiences and I was able to relate so much to what they were experiencing. And I was like, okay, what if that fits me? How does that kind of feel? And then what can I do with that? What can I do with this information? If what they're saying about themselves, there's something there that fits me and it shows me kind of how I'm showing up through life, how I've put myself in this position to like be reliving these cycles that I've lived for my entire life. Okay, what can I do about that? And after about 2.5 years of like the podcast and therapy and exploring that, and year later, my wife still asked for a divorce, and I'm like, okay, I told you, give me a year. All right, let's. It's a okay. So it's not something that I wanted. Now I had to start exploring the side of me that I was never able to explore. So when I started therapy, the reason I started therapy was because, or that, when they ask you, what brings you in? It's like, I can't describe my emotions or my feelings. Like I can't have a conversation about them. I don't know what they are. It's just like this. It's not this darkness inside me. It's just like a blank, right? It's like a black hole. It's just like nothing is there. It's just, I have no idea. So she hands me an emotions wheel. Well, what do you think you're feeling right now? And I look at it and I hand it back and I say, do you have anything in English? And she was like, that is English. And I'm like, yes, but what I'm saying is I don't understand what any of these mean.
Right.
I could tell you what anger is. I could tell you what sadness is. I could tell you what it is. I don't know what that feels like inside me. And then as I started to try to listen to my body and figure out what it is like emotionally, how these sensations, like you're talking about earlier, start to show up inside of me, right? Like those little cues that are there. But also recognize like when I'm feeling something that's putting me in a place of not being me. It's just like kind of a place of disarray. Um, and going through that, I recognized based on my kids running in actually. So when I record a podcast, sometimes my ex-wife would take the boys out so that they weren't loud and, yelling, so could have a recording without them. And she did that. And this day, like I was having a low mental health day and they come running in, they yell, Daddy, I love you. I missed you. And I just heard this little voice inside of me say, how could you love such a piece of shit? What is wrong with you? And in that moment, I was like, wait a second, where did that come from? I'm holding it against my kids that they love their dad. That's fucked up. Like, where does that stem from inside of me? And so I looked in the mirror later in the day and I noticed this like recoil and like this visceral feeling towards the person in the mirror. And I was like, oh, I hate myself. I don't just dislike myself. I hate myself. Okay, that's why there's a lot of things going on inside of me that keep showing up, like the self sabotage, like the reliving cycles, like all of this. If I view my entire life from the lens that I hate myself, a lot of things make sense. All right, what can I do to get out of this? Because I don't want to be at a place where I hold it against my kids and they love their dad. And it was like, okay, well, what's the opposite of hate? Love. It's like, yeah, that's not happening. I'm not sitting there saying, oh, hey, RJ, I love you. Like, look at everything you've done in your life. You have done so much. Like, you're so great. It's like, no, that's not happening. It's like, can I look in the mirror and shrug my shoulders and say, you're okay? Yeah, I can say that. I can say that. And it feels true. So I started there. And as I started doing that, I started noticing like allowing myself to make mistakes instead of just being so hard on myself, allowing things to happen around me and not blame myself. Um, just these little things like letting my kids say that they love me without being like, pushing them away. Um, Moments like that. And then I realized that I had done a lot of the work, but I still didn't understand exactly what I was feeling or the emotions inside. And I'd heard people talk about Brene Brown's Atlas of the Heart. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to check it out. And in reading that book, Atlas of the Heart, I had so many more words and understanding of how emotions were showing up. I could name them. I could actually have a conversation like with myself about, oh, you're going through grief right now and you're feeling anguish because you're going through a divorce that you didn't want. Your kids are not here. You have an empty house that you haven't had for years. Of course you're going through this. And just having that understanding allowed me to give myself compassion for the first time. And now I can really see what it is that I'm experiencing, have a better conversation about it. It's not always a great conversation because trying to explain what you're feeling to people, it doesn't always happen in a way that is clear, concise, and understood, right? There's a lot of mud involved with that because they're not experiencing what you're experiencing. And that's okay. So trying to change how that happens and how that looks and just know that I'm trying like goes a long way too, giving myself the credit there. Um, and that has led me to like where I am now. That was probably almost 3 years ago that like I read Atlas of the Heart and like that just opened up my world. And I've read a lot of different books since then, like nonviolent communication, like coming to understand like Stoicism and Buddhism and a lot of the different major religions, but not necessarily from a religious angle, but the philosophical angle. Um, really figuring out how ADHD shows up in life, not just in attentiveness or, um, being like drawn in different directions, things like that, but just how it really shows up and what it means that my brain is wired different from other people's. Um, and in doing that, I'm not expecting myself to just be able to fit into life. So, like you were talking about jamming that square peg in that round hole, that's what I was doing because I didn't understand that ADHD. I didn't understand how it showed up. I didn't understand a lot that had to do with it. And when I started to recognize how it was showing up and um, understand how it impacted my life, like now I can create a life that works for me. And I don't hold it against myself that I just don't fit into this life. Like I see other people and it seems like they do.
Yeah. Yeah, I've felt like that so many times, man. I was gonna say one of the things that you spoke about, first of all, Brene Brown actually was one of the authors where I was like, I'm not gonna like this stuff. And then I started listening to her audiobooks. I think I did listen to Atlas of the Heart, but there was one other one before that she had, I think, because that was the newest one she has, right?
Yeah.
I think there was one or it was,
So there's Into the Wilderness,
yep,
Daring Greatly.
that's the one. I like that
Yeah.
one. Daring Greatly,
Yeah.
I liked a lot. And it was definitely one of those. I've always, like I said, my first like kind of step into self-development and mental health was that like stoicism, trying to like the hard end of like I'm gonna train this shit out of me. That's basically like I'm gonna fucking I'm gonna push up until I can push this shit out. And I don't know. I just thought if I run, I can run away from this, maybe.
Mm,
And so for me, it was always kind of like an aspect of like, okay, I just got to wake up early. I got to exercise. I got to eat right. And I'll start to feel good. I even had a doctor one time where they were like, we went through like the whole like depression, anxiety questionnaire worksheet thing. And this is like the third or fourth doctor I spoke with. And I told him like flat out, I'm like, yo, if you start prescribing me pills within the first 5 minutes, I'm going to turn around and walk out of here. Like, I don't want this shit, dude. I seriously need to figure out a solution. And he's like, dude, I wouldn't prescribe anything to you yet. Just sit down. Like, I'm like, okay. And he just goes through this list of like, okay, what do you like? What's your relationship like? What's your exercise like? What do you read? Do you read? Like, do you do anything like that? Like, what do you what are your hobbies? What's this? And he goes through like all this, like, how do you sleep? How do you do this? And I'm like, yo, this guy's actually trying to figure out my life. But yeah, that was one of the books he gave me two books in the very beginning. He said, finish these books, come back, and like when you're done them, then we can discuss like some more stuff. It was kind of like a challenge he gave me. Like it was
hmm
kind of, which is what I needed. But I did get recommended Brene Brown, and I was almost averse to it at first because I'm like, I don't want this soft, mushy, gushy fucking. It's not me. It's not
Yeah.
the way I think. It's not. And then after hearing her speak, well, through Daring Greatly was one of the books where I was like, oh, I think this is a bit more me than I thought. I think that there is like kind of like this softer side that I have to start to embrace. And and I think a lot of the emotions that I feel, like the anger or the anxiety or the confusion, are based in like kind of a sadness or and for me, I think that we're wired, especially as men, to think like, I can't show this sadness. I gotta fucking bury that. And so, like, how does it manifest? Obviously, it's gonna manifest in confusion and anger. Like, you're
hmm
just gonna be pissed off and confused. Like, why do I feel this way? Why do I, I'm not like, it's kind of like your behaviors and your emotions aren't aligned. And you're like, why do I? And you're like internally confused, which of course, like
Yes.
anytime any of us are confused, we get frustrated. I know for me, that's at least like that's how it works. Like that's how I end up yelling at a blender or something like that. Like it's kind of like anytime I'm confused. So it's
Well,
just sorry.
going off of that, sorry for interrupting you, but I like I relate to that so much. And it's something that talking to men like that we experience. How often, once we hit, let's say 13, 14, how often were we allowed to not know the answer or be confused about something? And we weren't ridiculed, but instead it was okay, let's try to figure out how to get you to understand this. Right.
Yeah.
So, of course, when we get confused, of course, when we don't know, like there's going to be a reaction because in the past that was held against us.
Yeah, yeah. Actually, it's really interesting. I only started saying I don't know actually because I had when I worked in sales, I had a boss that said never fucking lie. So if somebody asks you
Ooh.
a question you don't know the answer, you just be like, I don't know, I'll get the answer for you. But he's like, don't fucking lie to your customers because it comes back on me. So like after he said that, like that, I think was 2017. I must have heard that. And ever since then, I'm like, I don't know. I'll get it. I'll get the answer for you. I don't have it right now.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. And it's almost like alarming when people like, cause like I don't know, like you're still an electrician. Do you work like residential or commercial?
I do both. So I went from high voltage electrician, and now because I have 50-50 with my kids, high voltage electrician, like those hours can get crazy.
Right.
So now I'm a residential commercial electrician. Like, yeah.
And I know like when you're residential, obviously customers are always around. They're gonna ask questions. It's almost funny sometimes because sometimes I'll start a project. They'll be like, "Oh, how are you gonna do that?" And I'll go, "Honestly, I don't know yet. I'm still working on grabbing an answer for that." And they're like,
Mm-hmm.
"What? How do you not know? This is." You're like, "Yeah, it's okay. I I've never
Yeah.
just been bamboozled before. Like we always find a solution. So like I feel good about it. You should."
Same. And that's what I say is like, well, we'll find out when we cut this wall open.
Yeah,
right? Like,
exactly.
I don't know how they framed this house. I don't know which way the floor joists are running right now. So it might be, it might be 3 hours. It might be 3 days. It depends with what we find on, on the backside of this wall. And then also it depends on um like I don't how many holes I'm gonna have to cut, right?
Yeah.
Because a lot of times to get wires from here to there, we have to cut at least 2 holes. Well, sometimes you got to cut 5. I think I only have to cut 2, but I start cutting and it's like, oh, there's a fire block. Oh, there's a second fire block. Oh, these aren't running the way that they should. Like what the, and so it becomes really difficult to be like, well, you said it would take this time and you'd only have to cut 2 holes. And it's like, you just never know. I don't have x-ray vision.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just getting comfortable saying that and knowing
Yeah.
people are gonna be a little bit like off put. Because like I feel like as much as we're conditioned not to say it, people are conditioned not to hear it. Like we kind
Yeah.
of feel like, hey, if I ask a question, I'm gonna get an answer.
Mm-hmm.
Especially with like the age of like Google and now AI, it's like, of course I'm gonna get an answer. But it's so
Yeah.
funny how how like off put people get. They're like, what do you mean you don't know? You're like,
I
I don't
thought you
know.
were an expert.
Yeah, you're like, I don't know. Could you tell me everything about you, what you do? Like, probably not. Like,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes it just like you figure it out. And yeah, there's something beautiful about that. One of the things you said earlier as well, when you were talking, you were saying something about like kind of looking at yourself in the mirror, not liking what you see, and you said, could I go to loving that? You were like, no. And then you said, well, could I start to just like say it's okay, like kind of give yourself grace or forgiveness? That was kind of the theme that I picked out. How did you start to do that? Because I had a conversation with someone on their podcast, and I ended up like tearing up because he started asking me these types of questions of like, if you met you're like your 9-year-old self or your whatever, could you, like, what would he say to you? And I know like I would be disappointed. There's like certain decisions I've made where I'm like, dude, that's nothing like me. Like there would be like almost like this like don't come near me type of vibe. And he's like, could you hug yourself? And I was like, no, my 9-year-old self would not want a hug from my 29-year-old self. He wouldn't trust him. He wouldn't feel safe. And like, there's something weird about that. Like, there's kind of like this internal, like, in just thinking about it, it's like, there's a part of me, like, I resent myself. Like, it's kind of, and it's been something that I've been thinking about a lot more is like, I have a tough time forgiving people. And I think that like stems from a tough time forgiving myself, like kind of like humanizing those errors?
Yes. Yes. I know. I understand, what you're saying and, where that's coming from because I, Olympic gold medalist grudge holder right here, like, world record holder. You want to talk about somebody who, I quit drinking because I'm a stubborn asshole. Like, so that goes both ways. Grudge holding, like I'm stubborn. Um, what I did was, what is the first step that I could take? Because I know that I don't want to hate myself. I don't deserve that hatred of myself, right? Like I don't deserve to be here where, yes, I'm my own toughest critic, but I'm nowhere near a friend or even an acquaintance to myself. I'm just hard, like, you know, constantly beating the shit out of myself for things that I have no control over. Um, and I was just tired of it. I don't deserve that. My kids don't deserve that in a dad. And I just wanted to change something. And so it was like, what's the next step that I could take? Do I think that I'm the worst human being on this planet? Well, no. Do I think I'm a bad person? No. Okay. Sometimes I have been a bad person. What percentage of my life have I been that bad person? It's like, you know, maybe at the high end, 5% of my life. Okay, why does that 5% negate that other 95%? It shouldn't. I can't say I'm necessarily a good person. Could I just say I'm okay? I'm okay. And it's like I just looked at myself and just said it. Yeah, you're okay. You're okay. I'm okay. You're okay. Yeah, that actually feels pretty decent. Okay, like that's something I can work with. So anytime I heard myself just really start to lay into me, um, like I made food and it was oversalted or it just tasted like shit, right? Like, okay, well, that doesn't mean that I'm a terrible cook or I'm a terrible person who can't make things. It just means that this didn't work out right. Like I'm still okay, right? Um, I drop and break something. You know, did I mean to do that? No, it's okay. Like I'm okay. I get to drop and break things. I'm freaking human. And through that, like constantly recognizing when I was really being mean to myself, well, does that mean that I'm a bad person? No. So I'm still okay. And then as I started to do that, I started to recognize moments where I was showing up better than just okay. Now I can start to recognize, okay, I'm not just like keying and focusing, and my brain's not taking these moments back to some of the mistakes I made where I said things that I was a little asshole, or you know, I did things that I really don't like. Like they are against what I value as a human. They're against, you know, what my character would be. A lot of the times those happened when I was drunk. Okay, so instead of pulling that up, it's like, oh, you know, remember that time that you had $20 and you bought, you know, somebody else's food, right? Do you remember that time that there was, you know, you saw a homeless person and you just sat and talked to them for 10 minutes? It's probably the first time in days somebody sat and listened to them for 10 minutes. Like, do you recognize, you know, just the times that you've gone out of your way to help people at work? And it's no, I don't recognize those things. Well, why not? I can recognize all the bad things, and that's what I focus on. That's what I key on. And that, like, all of a sudden, just like it clicked at work, the friends that I chose going throughout life, I would gravitate away from the people who actually liked to be around me, who gravitate from the people who liked to work with me and thought that I was a joy to work with. And I would go to the coworkers who would call me a piece of shit, call me stupid, like tell me why I sucked at my job, my life, everything else. And I wouldn't listen to the people who were like, hey, you're doing great. Like you've been at this job for 3 years and you're already doing things that people who've been here for 10 years don't know and can't do. And it's like, I wouldn't listen to them. I would listen to people who told me I was just shitty. And well, of course I did because I didn't like myself. So, of course, I believed people who told me why I shouldn't like myself. And I didn't believe people who told me why I was actually doing really good. And so, as I called it just finding the neutral. When I found the neutral, now I'm in a space where I can move up or I can move down. I'm not just stuck in the space where it's only down. Now from here, I can do a lot of different things. Whereas before, I had to get through the bad to get to neutral and then get to the good, which wasn't happening. That was too much energy. Um, and so with that, I was really noticing times when like I felt good. And then there were times where like I felt in disarray. Like I started to notice my energy in my body. Like, how was it? I felt calm. I felt peace. I felt really good about what was going on. I was motivated and inspired and ready to do things. Then all of a sudden I'd be like, something's wrong. There's nothing's going right. Like, you know, just I'd go from being at peace to just vibrating all over the place. And it's like, okay, something happened. What happened that put me in this place? And then, and this is where like that forgiveness piece really started to work for me was I looked at what forgiveness meant and I was like, or what I felt like other people wanted it to mean. And I was like, okay, what if forgiveness for me is I stop giving my energy to moments in the past, people in the past, events in the past that have already happened. And I instead take my energy back and I use it for what I want to use it. What if that's what I did? So I took my energy away from my ex-wife. I took the energy from the times that I was drunk, that I did things that I didn't like. Like, what if that's what forgiveness is to me? It was like, yeah, that sounds doable. That sounds right. It doesn't mean that I'm accepting of what they did or like I'm just like giving them a free pass. No, it just means I'm not giving them my energy or my attention because I've had enough of it and I'm using it how I want to use it. And that worked for me in being able to move forward and being able to just create a different way to show up in life that I could really use.
Yeah, it is interesting too, like when we have that guilt,
Mm,
how much when we I know for myself, like I thought when I think back at like past mistakes or past things that I fucked up in my life or things that I even just perceived that I fucked up, but we're just
yes.
like not gonna happen in life, things like that. And if I start to feel that guilt and shame, I literally start to think like you were saying, like maybe I deserve to be treated like shit. Like maybe I deserve to be spoken. Like maybe this is what I deserve. Like it's kind of like the reimbursement. I was a
Mm,
fucking dick and now I deserve to be treated like a dick. Like that's kind of like, it's really shitty and it's really like alarming how much when we're in that state of like guilt and shame about what we've done in the past, what we start to think we deserve right now, you know?
yeah. Yeah. And
Even not even just sorry, I was just gonna say
yeah.
not even just from others, but even from ourselves as well. Like just like not hanging out with ourselves. Like I started to think about going for a run as just hanging out with myself. Because I was like, oh, I would do this with my buddy back in the day. When I had my roommate, would be like, hey, let's go for a run at the track kind of thing. Well, I'm just gonna hang out with myself. What do I like to do? I like to move. I'm one of those hyperactive guys too. Like I cannot sit still. I can't if I'm gonna read, I have to exercise first. That's why I always,
Mhm.
do my workout and then do my reading or my sit down stuff. But, I just kind of think about, yeah, like it's weird what we think we deserve from others and from ourselves when we feel that guilt and shame, how we become kind of like a recluse and we kind of just like, yeah, I kind of deserve to be alone. And if anyone does talk to me, they probably deserve to be a little bit pissed off with me a lot. Like it's kind of like,
Yes.
why would they want to be, like you said earlier with your kids, like it's like, why would they want to be, do they know what I've done? How I
Mhm.
spoke? What I did?
And being able to recognize that is the first step to, okay, what can I do that would be different from this? Like I'm not going to get to looking in there and saying I love myself. Okay, what's the next thing? Can I just get the neutral? Like what would neutral be? Could I could I just get to a point where I'm not so degrading on myself that I wouldn't even treat my worst enemies this way? Like, I heard someone on 10% Happier podcast say, okay, I'm my own worst critic. That's okay. Cause sometimes that's a protective mechanism. Like it started as a protective mechanism, no matter what. But sometimes it's true. Like I need to be reprimanded, like verbally. But am I also my own best friend? Am I giving myself compassion? Am I giving myself grace? Am I giving myself forgiveness? Am I looking at how I can take this criticism and use it in my life going forward? Or am I just pulling myself down with the heaviest weights imaginable, but I can't see them and nobody else can see them, so they don't even recognize it? Is that what I'm doing? Or am I using it to get to where I want to get to? And as a parent, the something that's helped me show up different than even how, my parents showed up with me. It's not doing the opposite of what they did necessarily. Like sometimes I do, but I look at especially my oldest and I see me. I see me at his age. I've seen this since he was 1.5. Like I see me on him, like at that age. And the question I ask myself is, what did I need in the moment he's in right now? And I had really bad anger issues as a kid. And a lot of that's because, boys don't cry. So what do you do if you can't cry? You get pissed off. So when he's pissed off, I don't tell him not to be mad. I don't tell him like, I don't reprimand him. I don't get mad to meet his energy. I just sit there. What are you mad about right now? Like what? I'm not mad. Okay. Why? What are you upset about? I'm really sad because I asked for help. There was nobody coming to help. And I was like, okay, let's talk about it. Let's sit there and give him a hug. Be like, I understand what it feels like to feel alone. I understand what it feels like to feel like you ask for help and nobody's there. And it sucks, right? But I'm not just hugging him and like showing up different. I'm also showing up different for me at that age. And like that's where, this can get a little woo-woo, but it really is like healing that piece in me where all I wanted was somebody to see my pain and give me a hug. Somebody to sit there and actually listen to what was going on inside of me. I wasn't angry. I was scared. I was hurt. I felt alone. I didn't feel safe. There's so many things, but nobody took that time and they just saw the anger and they're like, oh, he's just an angry kid. He's just going to be another, let him be angry because nothing's going to happen and eventually he'll calm down.
Mhm.
Right. And so a lot of times as adults, and I sometimes ask this to my kids too, like when they start crying, if, let's say they fall, yeah, I ask them, are you hurt or were you scared? So with adults, if they're really angry, I'll ask them, okay, are you angry or are you scared? Or are you feeling hurt? Like which of these, because if we can sort through, we can work through it. But if we're not honest with ourselves, like I'm just fucking pissed off. You shouldn't have done that, blah, blah, blah. Okay, you shouldn't have done that, or it hurt when they did that. Well, it hurt when they did that. Okay, that's understandable. Of course that would hurt. Why wouldn't that hurt? Does you getting angry and covering that up actually help you to show up how you want to show up? Well, no. How do you want to show up? Well, I want to stand up for myself. Okay, what would that look like? Saying, hey, that was really hurtful. And I understand, like, from your perspective, and that's fine, but that doesn't give you a right to hurt me. And it's like in that moment, it's like, oh, now I know how I could show up different. Now I know how that I'm actually telling myself I have a need to stand up for myself. And that's what I want to do. And so, yeah, that was a long winded answer and, point, but there's, there, there's so much in there that you can do. It's just a matter of figuring out how to do it that works for you.
Yeah. Yeah. It is like I said, I don't know. You've probably heard of like the halt, like hungry,
Mm-hmm.
angry, lonely, tired. I had when someone told me that like a couple years back, that was kind of the same thing I used to have to think is like, what am I actually thinking here? Like it's pretty rarely hungry. I'm pretty like regimented in terms of like when I eat, and so it's usually like the angry, lonely, tired. Those are the usual ones for me. And I know like if it's early in the day like this, I'm usually not tired. I'm good to go. And so it just comes down to the other two. Like those are for me, like it's kind of like through process of elimination, it's like I just feel lonely right now. I just feel like a little bit fucking like maybe like, and why do I feel lonely? Because sometimes I'm even like around people and I feel lonely. And I'm like, I feel sometimes it's like it's almost like I you can't feel loved. Like you can't, and it's like as weird as it is, and as like harsh as it sounds, it's kind of like, why if I feel alone in front of other people, like there's maybe something I got to work on, like it's like, why am I not able to accept this? Like, why is it them or is it me? Maybe it's like a combination, but like you said, like it's like it's not like you can control other people. All you can just kind of do is control yourself. Just like kind of going through this process of like start to identify, like you said, oh, well, like I'm angry that this person did that. You're like, well, are you angry that that person did that, or did that person just do that, and did you get hurt by it? And like, and start to dig into like, what was their intention? Like, did they mean to hurt you? Do you think? You think this person woke up this morning and was like, how can I piss off RJ? Or like,
Yeah.
or is this person just living their own life, and then you just noticed something and didn't look at it in a charitable light, or like associated it with something else that somebody else did that pissed you off, and like kind of going through those emotions. I said your name, but for me, I go through with myself, right? Like it's kind of one of those things like yeah, and it always for me comes down to, like you said, with adults, it's always like one of those things for sure, that anger. What was the other one you said? Anger, hurt, or sad?
Scared.
Scared. Yeah, scared as well. That I
Mm.
think when I said confused earlier, I think maybe that's kind of the same idea. It's just like I don't
Yeah.
know what's going on. I don't know what the best course of action is. That's like the freeze feeling that I get.
Yeah. Oh, that's so good too. And there's, you know, with my kids, they're 5 and 6, so they don't recognize the nuances. Like if they hear me yell and um get really like quick movements and things like that, like they think I'm mad at them. And so there'll be times where like my oldest will look like he's running into the street because he likes to run right up to it and then stop. And if I know like he he obeys the rules. Like he knows the rule is don't step foot in the street unless you're holding daddy's hand. And but it'll still scare me. So I'll yell at him, stop. And he'll like turn around all scared, like, oh, what did I do? I didn't, I wasn't going to, I just wanted to. And I'll tell them, I'll sit there and be like, hey, I'm sorry, daddy got scared. So I was reacting because I was scared and I didn't want you to get hurt. And that's what that was. That wasn't, you're not in trouble. I'm not mad at you. I was just scared. And when we can recognize that in ourselves, like when we get angry and be like, yeah, it came out because it was a heightened emotional state. It comes out as anger. Well, I'm not angry. I was just scared, right? Like when I was a high voltage line tech, there was very few times that I'd get yelling and forceful at people. And when I did, it was because I was scared they were doing something that they shouldn't be fucking doing. Because you only get one chance in
Yeah.
this job. If you're lucky, you get two. Generally, you're only going to get one. And so, like, in those moments, like, hey, I didn't mean to yell at you. I was freaking scared that this was going to happen. So just know, like, you didn't necessarily do anything wrong. I just wanted to make sure that we are all going to be safe. That was it. And they're like, yeah, I get it. I get it. And I appreciate you doing that, right? Because I want somebody watching out for me.
Yeah, yeah. Or sometimes people are just like maybe Italian or something. Like there's sometimes people just yell, when they're just happy. Like
Yeah.
sometimes like even I get like that. I'm not even Italian, dude, but I get like that where um I'm not picking on Italians, but they're just like a loud volume people. But I get like that. Like kind of
Yes.
like if I even when I'm happy, I'll yell, and like I could be agreeing with you. I was talking to one of my best, like literally my best friend in the world. I'm talking to him yesterday. He's like, dude, I'm agreeing with you. I'm like, I know. And he's like, why
Isn't
do
that
you?
freaking great?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm like, I know. He's like, why do you sound mad? I'm like, no, I'm happy, dude. What are you talking about? Like, I have one of those voices where it's just kind of like, yeah, I just yell. And it is funny, like 'cause some people are more sensitive to it. Because I'm sensitive to it with other people. I'll be like that type of person. I'm like, don't yell at me. They're like, I'm just fucking talking, man. And it's
Yeah.
weird what we get sensitive to, like depending on like what you grow up with in the home. And I came from one of those families where like at the dinner table, if you don't yell, you're not heard. So like
Yep.
it's one of those, like that's where we got it from. But that's also the reason why I'm like, yo, one person talk at a time now. I'm kind of tired of that the way I grew up.
Mm,
Like so it's weird what we get sensitive to, you know?
yes. And how that shows up.
Yeah, like even like in conversations with people, I kind of got into that. Like in group settings, sometimes I almost have like an unrealistic expectation. I'm like, can we not all talk over each other? It's like, yeah, there's 10 of us here. We all kind of, it's not like we're just gonna have a round table meeting where one person speaks at a time. And I'm like, okay, I got to kind of navigate this now then, because it is a kind of an unrealistic expectation. And then like, okay, well, how do I work back from there? How about I just like
Yeah.
chat with one or two people at a time then? Maybe it is
Mm.
me. It always comes back to that. Like it's like maybe it is me.
Or maybe it's
Maybe it's Maybelline. Sorry.
and maybe it's how do I make this work for me?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Oh, and just how that can change your thought process too of going into situations. Um, and just like noticing, like, in the past couple of years, I've really noticed I used to, you know, go into bars all the time and like party and all this stuff. And now I get really overwhelmed by that combined noise and like that feeling of claustrophobia. And I think back to those times where I was drinking and it was like, no, I was just covering up that the feelings that I have, that uncomfortableness with alcohol. I've never really liked it. So it's like, why would I put myself in that situation? Like sometimes I do because there can be some connection made there. There can be some nostalgia or just, some enjoyment that can be had. But like recognizing how I show up the best or what doesn't necessarily work for me. Um, and, sometimes it looks like, yeah, I can go do that for an hour. I can't do it for 5. So stop like trying to force myself to be there for that long. It's like, all right, I've had my fill. I'm overwhelmed. I gotta go. See you.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely it is interesting how I definitely was like the same kind of like personality, especially when I was working in fitness, like in gyms and sales. And I always wanted to kind of like either be at the gym or going out. Like I want to go to a restaurant, grab some drinks, happy hour, let's go downtown, like let's stay out
Mm-hmm.
all night, let's party. And that's like I thought like I had to do that to get friends, to be cool, to feel good about myself. Because if I had this image of myself, and if I was going to do that, these things came along with it. Like that's kind
Mm-hmm.
of how it felt. Like I was like almost like I had seen like kind of characters in shows and movies. I was like, that's me. I guess that's me. That's
Yeah.
how So I'm like,
That's not my personality.
yeah, no, but that's how I was. I was like, oh, I want to
Yeah.
be like that guy.
Same.
Well, that's what he
Yep.
does, so that's me. That's instantly how I am. Then I'm cool like that, right? Like that's how it works. If I spend
Mm-hmm.
this much money, if I buy these people drinks, then I'm liked and I'm cool. If I can get laid, I'm double cool. Like that was like literally how dumb I was.
Yes.
And it's like I'm doing all these things, and it's like you said, like I don't really like doing this. And for me,
Mm-hmm.
like booze was one of those things. Like, don't get me wrong, I'm not a saint. It's not like I quit drinking booze because I was like a holier than thou. Like it was like, no, I identified like this is something I don't even like doing in the moment. People talk about like the hangover and like that's the price you pay. You're like, oh, but like I didn't even have fun in the moment. I was just doing it because my friends did it and I wanted to have those groups of friends.
Yes.
And it's like,
Oh.
wait, I don't even like doing this. Like, I literally feel
Mm-hmm.
anxious the whole time. I hate anything that makes me feel like disconnected from my body. If I can't catch a ball flying at my face or something like that. Like I don't like that feeling. It
Mm-hmm.
makes me anxious and uneasy. I don't like that. So like there was always so many different factors as to like, oh, I actually genuinely don't like this feeling. Like, why am I doing this and paying money to do it? Like, and wasting my time doing it. Like,
Mm-hmm.
and then there's the hangover, and then there's like the other issues. But it was like I genuinely am doing something I don't like doing. And maybe it's not booze, like for all the time. Like it was for me, but there's other things as well. Like you just do things all the time and you're like, "Oh, I don't like fucking doing this. Why am I doing this?" And
Yeah.
it's not like a paying tax thing. Like I don't like paying taxes, but I understand if I don't, they're gonna show up at my door. So I got
Mm-hmm.
kind of got to. So like, but there's other things where it's like, yeah, nobody's forcing me to do this. I'm just choosing this every day, like or every weekend or whenever it is. But it's like, why do I consistently choose this thing I don't like? It's like putting hot sauce if you don't like hot sauce on every meal and then wondering why you hate eating. You're like,
That's such a great analogy. And that, that's the part of being honest with yourself. Like, do I really like this? Am I doing this because I think I should be? There's, been things, do I enjoy doing this or do I do it because I'm good at it? And that one is like, damn, right? Because I enjoy doing things that I'm good at, but do I not enjoy this right now? And it's like, I don't enjoy this right now. Okay. Time to take a step away. Why am I doing things that I don't enjoy? Like life is very short. There's no point in doing things that you don't want to do for any longer than you have to. So if it's taking up a lot of time and you're not enjoying it, it's time to find something new. Try to find something, take a break at the very least. Whether it's a weekend or a day or two, just anything different.
yeah. Yeah, I definitely find that that's why I've tried to pick up like multiple different things because there's always like kind of like there definitely is a constant like going to the gym has always been like kind of something where I'm like, okay, I can carve out this little area, this safe
Mm,
space. That would be like my and before it was like I just wanted to put my headphones on and lift weights. I kind of like got to a point where, like you said, I kind of like thought about it. I'm like, I don't really enjoy doing this anymore. And kind of like the hot sauce on food thing. Like I was like, I'm just gonna find a new version of exercise I enjoy doing. I'm not gonna
yes.
stop exercising. I'm not gonna stop. I just don't really like going into a room fucking lifting weights anymore with no goal, no purpose in mind. Like it was kind of just like I'm like this feels like purgatory. Like I feel like Sisyphus just pushing the rock up the hill every day. And there's no
Yeah.
like you can do it, but it's not like enjoyable. And then
Mm,
you just like instant like maybe I'll pick up a new sport. Maybe I'll pick up a new hobby. Maybe I'll join you know, a pickleball team or whatever. Like what, for like you just kind of have to I had to find like kind of a community or a sport that worked for me. Like that something that I genuinely look forward to. Like I like when I'm at work, I'm like, oh, I can't wait to do that. I can't wait to go to jujitsu. I can't wait to just, like do this new thing and like have a community of people that are like, hey, you're actually getting better, man. Good job. Hey, I see
yeah.
you're improving. Good job. Or just like, thanks for showing up because if you don't show up, I can't train. It's kind of like one of those things where you get like an appreciation for other people. Like, wow, thanks for teaching me that thing, guy that's 10 years younger than me, who,
Mm.
is trying to figure out his calculus test next week.
And that's, oh, what a great mindset to have too. The understanding that anybody can teach you, So no matter, I haven't drank for coming up on 11 years. And so being in groups where people are evaluating their relationship with alcohol, a lot of people are eliminating it. Others are looking to just not have their life ruled by it. Anyway, as long as it's a healthy relationship with you works, but people will hear like I have over 10 years of not drinking and they're just like, well, I can't really, I don't really have anything to share like you do. And I'm like, wait a second. What? My journey is unique. So I have like my perspective and how I went through things, but you have your own perspective. Even if, let's say, you drank um, next week, you still have wisdom right now that you can share, and you'll have wisdom after that.
Mm.
It's not about sharing, thinking that you have the answers. It's about sharing your experience and what can we take from that and be able to show somebody else like, hey, this is how I understand this thing in jujitsu. Like, this is how I understand this move. Like, if I move my body this way, it's kind of like swinging a baseball bat, and I can, get my hips into it and my body can kind of torque. And so if I think about it like I'm swinging a baseball bat, my body will work how I want it to. And it's like, oh, I never thought about it that way. That's really, even though they've had, you know, 2 or 3 years of experience, they've struggled with this move and they hear about the different perspective on something and they're like, that makes sense to me. Okay. And now they can start to do it different. And it's the same thing throughout life. Like, yeah, I've had a week and I just recognize like this thing. And it's like, damn, I never thought about it that way. Like, you just opened my eyes for, I could take that and use it in other parts of my life too. Like, wow, okay, thank you for sharing that. So, opening your mind to learn from other people, as well as understanding that I have something to share, even if I don't have the same experience or level, like years or, days or whatever it is. Like, I still have something that I can offer.
Yeah, yeah. I definitely feel that a lot. I think that it's something that I have to look and open myself up to a lot more because you said earlier
Mm,
you came through your kind of development through stubbornness, you said.
yeah.
Like that was one of the first things you said, I think, and I
Mm,
relate to that a lot because I'm one of those people where like I'm a habitual white knuckler. Any progress that I make in my life is because I'm like I said earlier, like I'm gonna just train myself through this.
yep.
I'm one of those people where after like 4 years of doing something, someone's like, "Hey, have you thought about doing this?" And I'm like, "Yeah, that seems way easier than what I'm doing. Like, why the fuck am
Mm-hmm.
I doing this
Yes.
still? Like, are you kidding me? Like,
I did the same thing with like my emotions and feelings too. Like the exact same way. Like, I did it myself.
yeah,
And it's
yeah,
like, I always tell people, I did it myself. I don't recommend it. Don't do
yeah,
it that way. Do
yeah,
not follow my example. Let's figure out a way that make it easier for you, that will also probably help make it easier for me,
yeah."
and work on that together.
It is like that. I'm somebody that's like I had to figure out, like it's like almost like I had to figure out what kind of coding it was. I'm not like a computer
Mm,
guy, like a tech kind of guy, but like I've heard people talk about it, and like I just kind of had to figure out. Like I felt like I was trying to run diagnostics for like a Mac on like an
mm,
operating system, and it's like my operating system was like a Windows. You know what I mean? Like I had to figure
yes.
out what I was even like what was even
Oh,
going on.
that's such a great analogy. Again, like learning, how my brain and my body is wired with ADHD, just how different that is. It's just, yeah, it's one of those things where it's like, it opens me up to look at, oh, this could be why, and not holding it against myself like I'm broken or defective or damaged. It's just
Yeah.
like, no, it's just different. And so if that's different, how could I implement like these different things?
Yeah. And for me, like I said, it was like really white knuckling it. Like
Mm-hmm.
I'm one of those people where I think my best when my body's moving, and so like
Yeah.
it has to be the right movement because if there's certain things like I'm just like fully engaged. But if I'm running, I'm doing something like running and I
Mm-hmm.
just leave my headphones off. That's when I had a run last week. I cried 3 times, I think, in like 40 minutes. It was like short little bursts of tears, but it was like, and I got home and I just sit and like write about it because like that's how my self-development happens. Like it for me, like it's like those
Yeah.
moments of like I'm running, I'm thinking about this thing and I'm like, "Oh fuck, I'm scared of this." Or holy shit, I was a douche to this person. Like I thought the whole time they were a douche. I was the douche. I'm like, I can't believe I said that thing. If somebody said that to me, I'd punch them. I'd fucking hit them. Like there's no way I'd let somebody say that thing to me. And I just said that, like to that person I claimed I loved. Like, are you kidding? Like there's always like but those thoughts for me come like when I'm moving.
Yeah.
And so like I thought you hear people, it does come in the shower, but I always thought those great ideas would come in the shower. I'd be like, where's these great ideas people talk about in the fucking shower? And for me, like I had to think, oh, that's not how it works for me. Like I got to do other things. And then white knuckle it and write it down. Like I'm so fucking for me, like I didn't write anything for years. Like I would type everything. And I was like, I gotta kind of reconnect with something that I did as a kid. But I think that that kind of relates to what you were talking about earlier as well, like kind of giving your younger self a hug. I no man, what was the words you used? I can't remember what you used.
What did I need in
Right,
this moment when
right,
I was in that situation or
right.
similar?
Yeah, yeah. And this kind of the just kind of figuring out, I guess, when you do your best reflecting, I guess, is like for
Yeah.
me, that was one of the biggest steps that I had to take. RJ,
Yeah.
thank you very
Thanks,
much for your
Mark.
time today, brother. I really
This
appreciate
has
this
been really great.
conversation.
Yeah, me too. This is really, just reflecting and being able to share experiences and just like, you know, just connecting, really connecting. It's always a pleasure. And I appreciate you, with your patience and setting this up and just how wonderful this conversation has been. I feel like
Do
we
you,
could go for another 2 hours.
oh, I easily could. Trust me, I easily could.
Yeah.
Do you have any other like pages other than Untapped Keg? Just the podcast
So
that you're running?
yeah, the podcast is Untapped Keg. And then I have a free group coaching the first and third Monday of the month at 8 p.m. Eastern time. Um, and that is, you can find that at untappedkeg.com.
Beautiful, man. I'm gonna check that out as well. Thank you very
Awesome.
much for your time today, brother. I hope you
Thank
have a
you.
good
I appreciate
Saturday.
you, Mark. Yeah, you too. Thanks,
Much
Mark.
love.
See
Have a
ya.
good one.